Hi, everybody. Welcome back to day 6 of American History 1, Unit 2. So if you remember, we left off last time talking about the Wintern Valley Forge and how terrible of a time the new American military is having with the war now that we've officially separated ourselves from Great Britain. We need a win, and we need it badly. And we're going to start to get it here as we get into 1777. Our first small win is going to come against General Cornwallis, who was the commander, one of the main commanders of British troops in the colonies, and he is going to retreat against or from George Washington at Princeton. It was Christmas Eve, and General Washington took about 2,500 men, and at night he crossed the Delaware River, and that's the sort of famous picture of him on the boat with his men crossing the river. That famous painting is of that night in Trenton, and in the middle of the night they crossed the river and they attacked the Hessians, who were those German guns for hire who had taken over the town of Trenton. They managed to capture more than 900 of these guys. So Cornwallis arrives as backup, tries to strike back, but then Washington manages to hit Cornwallis's rear at Princeton and forces him to retreat completely in order to protect his military supplies, because his supplies are at the rear. If you lose your supplies, it's only a matter of time before your entire unit just falls apart. So this is a major deal for us. Finally we're seeing one of Washington's plans fully come to fruition here. He's finally got soldiers who are listening to him and following orders. He's had a lot of soldiers who were not doing that in the past. And with the amount of men that he had, he was actually able to defeat a major British general. So this is really lighting a new fire under the butts of the Americans, and at the same time it's pissing off the British. It makes them want to end the rebellion once and for all. So the British military plans to send 2 groups south from Canada, and then one group north up to New England. So they plan on cutting New England, which is, the area of colonies like Massachusetts and New York. They plan on cutting off those colonies because they're such a crucial part of the war effort for the American. I said cutting off those colonies. They're states now. Cutting off those states. And so they're going to send in 2 British units from the north from Canada and 1 up from the south to completely surround those colonies. Now, one of the generals who was leading this group, he's leading the one coming up from the south, is a guy named General Burgoyne. And we managed to find out almost by sheer accident that what his plan is essentially and where his movements are towards. So General Horatio Gates is leading a group of American soldiers, and he calls in units from Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and New York, and they managed to surround General Burgoyne at Saratoga. And so it's pretty clear that being that surrounded, you can't even retreat. You have to surrender, which is sort of like the ultimate defeat. So General Burgoyne surrenders his troops to General Horatio Gates at Saratoga on October 17th of 1777. This is a massive blow to the British military. This is the Battle of Saratoga, and many historians consider this to be the turning point of the American Revolution, the turning point for the War for Independence, because what it means. What it means is this is not just a retreat. This is a surrender by the British military to this brand new American army. It's a huge deal, and it's going to get attention from the right people. The people we want to get attention from are possible foreign allies like France. So we are going to end up making a formal alliance with France, and the only reason that they are willing to make that alliance is because of our win at the Battle of Saratoga. Now, the French have always had problems with the British, so it's not entirely, a surprise that they would want to get involved with the colonies. But it is also important to remember that they did just fight a war with Great Britain and lost. So that makes them bitter, but it also makes them weak. Like, do they want to risk getting into another war so quickly for a group of people that they don't really care about? They were very hesitant at first, and we had been trying to negotiate with France to step in on our behalf for quite some time. People like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin have been working on this. Other French diplomats have been in the United States, in the colonies now for quite some time, trying to work out a good relationship. People like Marquis de Lafayette, who I'll talk about in a moment. But Saratoga is going to catch the attention. They're going to say like, oh, they just beat the British military on their own. Nobody wants to get in on the losing side. But after seeing Saratoga, it's clear that this might not be the losing side. And with French help, it won't be the losing side. So in February of 1778, Benjamin Franklin is working with the French government, and he manages to write up 2 treaties, and they're going to be signed by him and his sort of French counterpart. The first treaty is a treaty that we say is of amity and commerce. Amity is basically another word for friendship, and commerce is another one for trade. So the first treaty is basically like a friendship treaty. What the first treaty does is it grants each other, so like the United States is granting France, and France is granting the United States the status of most favored nation, meaning France is now officially our favorite country. So we're going to treat each other like BFFs. We get first dibs on trade, future alliances, etc. It also guarantees all possessions in the New World, which basically means, that we're not going to try to take any French territory away after the war is over, and they're not going to try to take any land away from us. The second one is the treaty for the war, essentially. This is the war treaty. It basically puts us in an alliance for United States independence. It says that neither country will stop fighting, neither country will lay down their arms until Great Britain recognizes the independence of the United States. And that as soon as war between France and Great Britain breaks out, then that treaty will go into effect. And from the moment that France begins fighting with Great Britain, they're on our side until the very end. Now, when the British government hears about this, they crap their pants, essentially. Lord North, you remember who we said was the new Prime Minister of Great Britain, and King George, they realize that they need to give in. And so they scramble with Parliament and pass a bill, essentially giving into every demand that the colonists ever had, like repealing the taxes, give them representation, all of the above. They, pulled all the taxes. They pardoned all these revolutionary leaders, basically saying, like, this is treason, but we'll forgive it at this point. Now, unfortunately for them, this bill is passed about 2 weeks too late. So in other words, we were already past the point of no return. We couldn't get out of this alliance with France. But it doesn't matter. We don't want to. Americans don't care about what the British government is doing now. We still want our independence. We've put too much work now into independence to just let it go. And we're too mad at the British government. So now this is officially an international war. On June 17th, France and Great Britain will engage in a naval battle. Great reason to have France on our side. They actually have a navy. And so from that moment on, that means that the second treaty is in effect, and France will be working with us until Great Britain recognizes us as the independent United States of America. So France will bring over Army and Navy with their own military commanders and troops. But one of the most important of those commanders and French officials is going to be this guy right here, Marquis de Lafayette. Lafayette was living actually in the colonies before the war broke out. He was very close with Alexander Hamilton. He was close with George Washington, and he had gone back to France specifically to rally support for American independence. He was one of the ones who was working with Benjamin Franklin to sort of convince the French government to enter the war on our side. So when they agree, he comes back with all of these ships now and all of this army to help the Americans win their independence, which is pretty cool. Him and Washington are going to be very tight. He's going to be sort of like Washington's French BFF, his sort of French counterpart. The French will bring 12 warships and several regiments of troops. And as soon as we sign this treaty with France, Spain is like, hey, we could use this as a great opportunity to get some land. So Spain decides that they're going to start fighting Great Britain also. They don't form an alliance with us. They're just also going to be at war with Great Britain at the same time in the New World. When Spain gets involved, the British have to move their focus to the southern states because that's largely where the Spanish are. And when that happens, they end up capturing both Savannah and Charleston, and they forced General Benjamin Lincoln to surrender his army. He had over 5,000 soldiers. This is not good for us. So we're going to replace General Lincoln with General Horatio Gates. If you remember him, he was the one who won the Battle of Saratoga. Well, that ended up not going well at all. Horatio Gates will be a total coward, and his entire army will flee the battlefield when they face off with the British in Camden, South Carolina. Very terrible American defeat. So this makes the British think that Americans would either flee or retreat whenever they were faced with real British troops. But that's just not the case. They just weren't getting good examples of what it's like to see real American soldiers. So if you recognize or remember the name of this guy, this is Benedict Arnold, and he's going to be, have quite a legacy here for the American Revolution. Benedict Arnold had been a major proponent for independence. He had even been a son of liberty for a while. He had been one of the generals who helped Horatio Gates win the Battle of Saratoga, and he had been a really reliable soldier up until this point. Unfortunately, Benedict Arnold got himself into a debt problem, and he really needed money desperately. So the woman that he was with convinces him to work as a spy for the British military General Clinton for over a year, and he's writing to the general telling them, troop movements of the American military, secrets, and all sorts of stuff like that. He lets the British into warehouses where we're storing weapons, and then finally, when he's the commander at West Point, which is now our top military school in the country. At that time, it was just a fort. He agrees to surrender West Point to the British, and he gives this note in which he says all of this to a guy named John Andre. And John Andre is on his way to the British to deliver this message when he gets captured by Americans. They get this message and they read it, and they're like, holy crap, Benedict Arnold is a traitor. He's set us up here, and he's going to absolutely betray us. So Arnold has to flee American-controlled territory and head to General Cornwallis. You remember I mentioned he was one of the top British military generals in the colonies, or in the U.S., I guess, who had just gotten from North Carolina to Virginia, and Cornwallis was at Yorktown, which is in the Chesapeake Bay coastal area. Benedict Arnold will stay with Cornwallis for the rest of the war because he knows if he goes back to the American-controlled areas, he'll probably be killed. And then after the war, he ends up moving back to Great Britain because there's no chance, for him here in the United States. He's just going to be public enemy number one. So George Washington is going to formulate a plan to finish this war once and for all at Yorktown. Cornwallis is at Yorktown, which I told you is in the Chesapeake Bay. If you look at this map, here's Yorktown, Chesapeake Bay. This is where Cornwallis is. He wants to trap Cornwallis. He wants to surround him and force him to surrender. So he asks the French Navy to establish a blockade in the Chesapeake Bay, essentially putting a ton of French ships right here, which would stop Cornwallis from being able to get out of this area, cutting him off from the rest of the Chesapeake Bay. So Admiral de Grasse is going to command a French fleet to set up a blockade there, and it will also prevent any other British troops from getting in by the sea to back up Cornwallis. Then part 2 of the plan is to have Lafayette trap Cornwallis by land. Right here, Lafayette will bring in French military and trap them by land. Since Yorktown is on this peninsula, you see right here, if Cornwallis can prevent if Lafayette can prevent Cornwallis from moving past this, they won't have anywhere to go by land or by sea. Then after that, Washington will come in with a third wave of American soldiers and attack Cornwallis. So this is exactly what happens. Cornwallis has 7,000 men, and with all of the foreign armies, with the French combined with the American troops, there are 17,000 soldiers on our side. So the British are significantly outnumbered. So this is the Battle of Yorktown. It lasts for 3 weeks. And finally, we are successful, and Cornwallis is forced to surrender to George Washington on October 19th of 1781. After Cornwallis's surrender, the war is over, and it's only just a formality now. So the fighting will stop in 81, and we'll work over the next year and a half to work out a treaty. And we will sign that treaty in 1783, and it will be yet another Treaty of Paris. This is going to be signed by Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, John Jay, Henry Lawrence, quite a few big names of founding fathers and radical thinkers here in the colonies. Not the colonies anymore, the United States. I keep doing that. I'm so used to saying the colonies now. So in the Treaty of Paris, Great Britain formally recognizes the United States as independent. It establishes the western U.S. boundary as the Mississippi River. It also agrees that the British have to remove all their troops that are currently in the United States. We also agree that we will return the property and the rights of all the loyalists. We had arrested a lot of loyalists and confiscated a lot of their goods because they were supporting the British, so we agreed to give it all back. And now the French are a little mad about the treaty because we didn't really consult them before making these arrangements. They felt like we, since they were our most favored nation, like we should have run this by them, especially since we're signing the treaty in France. So they were a little hurt, but Benjamin Franklin is able to do some, schmoozing and smooth things over, and we're able to remain allies. We also write in the Treaty of Paris that Spain will regain control of Florida. We had temporarily taken control of Florida, but they wanted it back from the British, so we give it back to them. And we also settle up all of the American debts with the British merchants. So us and Great Britain are officially on a clean slate, on to bigger and better things. Thus begins the life of the United States of America.